In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 8th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Montreal Canadiens versus Florida Panthers. Florida roll into Montreal looking like the classic heavyweight that has already lifted the belt a couple of times, and yet, if you peel back the logo and just stare at how this season has actually gone, it feels a lot closer to a fair fight than the betting screen suggests. They are two-time defending champs, sure, but they are also sitting on a record of 22-17-3 with a -5 goal differential, which is not exactly the aura of an unstoppable force strolling through town. They are scoring a touch over 3 goals per night, giving up a little more than that, and a lot of the old identity built on Alexander Barkov swallowing minutes and Matthew Tkachuk dragging games into the mud is sitting in street clothes instead of on the bench, with Barkov out long-term and Tkachuk still waiting to debut this season. Seth Jones is on the shelf for a few weeks. Brad Marchand is their leading scorer but just had to leave a game early with that precautionary third-period exit. And when a team that leans this hard on one guy for offense has him listed as day-to-day, it changes how safe that favorite price really feels, even if he plays. On paper, the Panthers still look solid, not broken, and that might be where the trap starts. They are around 3.1 goals scored and 3.2 allowed. The penalty kill sits in the low 80% range. They put up just under 30 shots most nights, and everything about them screams above average, but human rather than fire-breathing monster that ruins your week. The core that is actually dressing right now, with Marchand and Sam Reinhart driving up front, Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, Anton Lundell, Eetu Luostarinen, and that defense built around Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling, plus Sergei Bobrovsky and Daniel Tarasov in net, is still tough, still clever, but not invincible, especially when you fold in the travel and the emotional weight of chasing a third straight cup. Honestly, it feels a bit like watching a veteran sales team that just hit quota 2 years in a row now trying to grind through a quarter where the big closer is banged up and the spreadsheets look a little less friendly. Montreal, on the other hand, are not really playing the role of plucky underdog anymore, even if the odds board keeps trying to cast them that way. They come in at 24-13-6 with a +5 goal differential, and they have turned Bell Center back into a place where visiting teams are not just checking in, they are bracing themselves, especially with a tidy little home heater and that recent win over Calgary in this same building fresh in everyone's mind. They score roughly 3.3 goals a night, allow a little over 3.2, which says, we will trade chances with you and usually land on the right side of it. And they do it with a mix of young talent that no longer looks wide-eyed. Nick Suzuki steering things, Cole Caulfield ready to rip, Juraj Slavkovsky growing into his frame, Lane Hudson and Mike Matheson jumping into the rush from the back end. In net, Jakob Dobes has stacked wins, while Sam Montembolt and Jacob Fowler give them extra security, which is why this team can live with a faster, looser style at times without feeling like they are juggling chainsaws. They are not fully healthy either, and that is worth keeping in the picture so we are not romanticizing them. Josh Anderson and Jake Evans are out. Alex Newhook is still recovering from that ankle surgery. Patrick Lane is working his way back from core muscle surgery with a timeline that points more toward later in the season. Kirby Dach is not ready after his fractured foot, and Kaiden Guhle is still in that gray zone of working back rather than locked in regular. Even with those pieces missing, though, the Canadiens have played like a group that has found a way to blend offense with just enough structure, and the depth has been competent instead of chaotic, which is a polite way of saying that a few years ago this same injury list would probably have sunk them. Now it just seems to shuffle the spotlight onto somebody else for a night, which is what good teams do in a long season. Here is the thing that really jumps out when you zoom out and think like a bettor for a second, scrolling those lines on your phone. The market is hanging Florida around the -134 range on the money line, with Montreal hovering at about +112 at home, which looks a lot like a number built on old assumptions about what Florida is supposed to be when they are fully loaded rather than what they are on this particular date with this particular roster. You have the banged-up champion, missing its captain, waiting on one of its biggest stars, dealing with a key defenseman injury and nursing its current driving force, laying a road price in a building where the opponent has the better record, the better goal differential, and all the emotional momentum of a fan base that has finally been given permission to believe again. Florida absolutely still has the talent and the muscle memory to show up and remind everyone why they have two banners, and Bobrovsky can absolutely spoil a night all by himself, so this is not a pick that pretends there is no risk. It is just that when you strip away the logos and focus on this season's reality, the side that looks mispriced is the one getting plus money at home, skating harder, healthier, and hungrier right now. As our first pick for this matchup, the Montreal Canadiens money line is our full game side pick. The posted total is sitting at 5.5, and you can see from the juice that the books already know the over is going to attract attention, but they have not moved the number up to 6 in most spots, which is interesting once you look at the way both teams' seasons have actually played out. Florida games have been living in the 6.2 to 6.3 goal range on average, roughly 3.1 scored and 3.2 allowed, and Montreal games are even wilder, floating around 6.5 to 6.6 goals with about 3.3 for and just over 3.2 against. One projection model has this matchup pointed toward about 6.6 combined goals, and the pattern backs that up, with Panthers games getting over 5.5 in more than 20 games and Canadiens games doing the same in 29 of 43, which leaves both sides averaging around 6.4 total goals when you blend the scoring and conceding together. Let me explain why that matters beyond just a pile of numbers. Those figures are not what you see in tight checking, suffocating, clamp-down teams that are happy to grind out low-event nights. They are what you see in games that open up, where rush chances appear regularly and special teams end up playing a real role rather than just filling time. If you think about watching these teams this year, the vibe check matches the data pretty well. Florida no longer sleepwalking to tidy 3-1 wins. Montreal almost allergic to boring nights. It is the kind of environment where a 5.5 total starts to feel like that friend who insists, "I am only staying for one drink," and somehow is still there at closing time. Technically possible, but not really consistent with how things have been going. The goalie picture does not exactly scream goal prevention clinic either, even though there is plenty of individual talent in those creases. Bobrovsky is still stacking wins, but he is sitting on a 2.85 goals against and an 88.5 save percentage, which is respectable but not the kind of form that slams the door every night. Pickdawgz is in a similar neighborhood with around a 3.01 goals against and an 88.9 save percentage, and with Montembeault and Fowler also part of the rotation, Montreal has more of a collective solution in net than one lights-out superhero shutting teams down on his own. In practice, that usually means you get enough big saves to keep the team competitive, but not so many that a wide-open game suddenly turns into a 1-0 goaltending duel out of nowhere. The injuries only tilt things further toward offense rather than away from it, which sounds backward at first but makes sense when you walk through it. Florida are still missing Barkov's elite defensive work down the middle. They do not have Tkachuk yet to grind lines into sawdust, and Seth Jones being out chips away at their ability to soak up tough minutes on the back end, which is how you end up needing Bobrovsky and Tarasov to erase just a little more than you would like. Montreal, juggling the ongoing absences of Lane, Newhook, Doc, and the uncertainty around Guhle, has leaned even harder into the idea that their blue line can create as much as it prevents, with players like Hudson and Matheson encouraged to push the pace and jump up rather than play scared. When your defense is built to attack and your opponent is stitched together with temporary solutions in key spots, you are basically inviting a game script where chances come in waves, and that rarely leads to a quiet scoreboard. Here is the thing about how these two try to win right now, and it matters a lot for the total. Florida, without Barkov, usually do not go into a building like Montreal trying to grind out a 2-1 win. They lean on Marchand and Reinhart to tilt the ice, they let the skill guys make plays, and they trust that even if they trade chances, their experience and goaltending will keep them in control enough of the time. Montreal, finally armed with a power play that sits north of 23% and a 5-on-5 shooting profile that does not look like a rebuilding team anymore, has very little incentive to slow things down at home when the crowd is buzzing and they know they can punch back if they get punched first. Put those two approaches into the same game, add in the energy of Bell Center when it starts to feel like a big night, and you usually get something closer to a track meet with goalies trying to survive rather than a frozen chess match where every shot is a minor miracle. When you line all of that up with the number on the board, a total of 5.5 looks a little conservative for what both of these teams have been this season. Barring late, dramatic lineup changes that pull multiple key forwards from the equation, or a completely outrageous performance from one of the goalies that bends the game out of its usual shape, the most realistic script involves both sides finding the net, probably more than once, and that familiar feeling of a scoreboard that just keeps ticking along. There is always a world where the posts get hit, the goalies stand on their heads, or penalties vanish and the game tightens up. But based on what these rosters have shown lately, that would be the exception rather than the pattern you are betting on. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Toronto Maple Leafs versus Philadelphia Flyers. Toronto walks into Philadelphia wearing the underdog label, which is kind of funny when you remember how loud their highs have been this past week alone. That wild New Year's comeback against Winnipeg, the emotional record-breaking night for their captain on Long Island, and then a calm, professional takedown of Florida right after it. You can almost feel the swagger starting to creep back in, that sense that if this group gets rolling early, the whole game bends around their skill and their pace. At the same time, the numbers on the page still tell you why they are catching a plus price here. They score like a top-tier attack but give plenty back the other way, and that road record looks like something you would hide in the junk drawer, not display on the fridge. Toronto has become that team bettors both love and hate because they are capable of making you feel like a genius or an idiot inside the same 10-minute stretch of hockey. Across the ice, Philadelphia has gone in almost the opposite direction, and it suits this matchup perfectly. They have built something that feels steady and grown-up, a team that might not blow you away with flash, but leans into structure, goaltending, and home ice comfort at Xfinity Mobile Arena. You watch them at home and it feels methodical, a tight neutral zone, patient breakouts, and just enough offense layered on top of very real defensive insulation. That is exactly the recipe that usually earns favorite status against a road team that lives on chaos more than control. Here is the thing, though, and this is where it gets interesting if you like to grab a short dog. When you strip away the jersey logos and just look at game flow, Toronto's high-event style is the most volatile ingredient in this matchup. Philly's structure is good, but it is not the kind of suffocating, sit-on-your-neck system that completely erases high-end talent for 60 minutes. If anything, their preference for playing honest 5-on-5 hockey can give Toronto the exact canvas they want, especially if the Leafs' forecheck shows up like it did against Florida and their penalty kill stays sharp enough to survive the odd mistake. Psychologically, this spot leans more uncomfortable for Philadelphia than it might appear on the betting board. They are favored, they have the tidy home record, and the building will be buzzing after a strong run of results. Toronto, on the other hand, is in that sweet, slightly dangerous mood where they have taken some punches, responded with statement wins, and know they can trade chances with almost anyone. When that version of the Leafs gets to play as the nothing-to-lose side, especially against a team that prefers rhythm and order, it often turns into a game where the underdog's ceiling matters more than the favorite's floor. So while the market leans toward the safer-looking home profile, the combination of Toronto's offensive ceiling, recent momentum, and the way their style can stretch a structured opponent pulls the spread conversation in the other direction. If this turns into one of those nights where the Leafs' skill actually cashes in on the looks they create, the favorite tag on Philly starts to feel a bit heavier than it looks on the screen. As our first pick for this matchup, the Toronto Maple Leafs money line is our full game side pick. On one side, you have a Toronto team that has treated normal scores like a suggestion lately. 6-5 against Winnipeg felt like a video game. Then they followed it up by pushing the Islanders in a tight, emotional overtime loss, and then dialed it back just enough to beat Florida with that clean 4-1 kind of result fans always say they want. The common thread is not the exact scoreline, it is how quickly Leafs games can flip from controlled to chaotic when the skill starts connecting or the coverage frays for even a shift or two. Philadelphia, by reputation, drags games down into a lower scoring grind, but that reputation only tells part of the story. Their defensive numbers are excellent, sure, yet this is not a team that spends 60 minutes turtling around its own net. They transition with intent, their blue line is willing to jump at the right moments, and at home especially, they are comfortable in those one bounce away from blowing this open kinds of stretches. You watch their recent run and there is a noticeable pattern of games that sit quiet for a bit, then open up in the middle frame or late when fatigue, penalties, or score effects kick in. Here is the thing that quietly matters for a total. Toronto's offensive talent almost forces opponents to choose between sitting back and getting slowly picked apart or stepping up and risking odd man rushes the other way. Very few teams can sit in a shell for 60 minutes against this group without giving up either dangerous looks or a pile of penalties. Once special teams come into play, that is where the Leafs' shooting talent and Philly's willingness to counter can both fuel the scoreboard, even if the underlying systems on both sides are reasonably sound. You also have the human side of this matchup working against a sleepy, low-event script. The Leafs are coming in with their star in the middle of a red-hot stretch and a room that has just lived through dramatic swings, which naturally encourages a keep-pushing mindset rather than a careful, conservative one. The Flyers, buoyed by their own recent success and energized home crowd, are not exactly set up to treat this like a preseason Thursday either. In games like this, when both benches have reason to feel good and neither coach wants his group to sit back and watch the other team skate, the tempo tends to climb as soon as the first goal lands. So while the raw defensive reputation of Philadelphia might nudge some people toward expecting a quieter night, the actual blend of Toronto's high-event DNA and Philly's willingness to play real hockey, not just survival hockey, leans toward a game where both teams find their way onto the scoreboard multiple times. If this one reaches the late stages with anything resembling a one-goal margin, you are suddenly talking about aggressive pushes, pulled goalies, and all the little endgame moments that have a habit of nudging totals upward rather than keeping them stuck in neutral. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Minnesota Wild versus Seattle Kraken. Minnesota rolls into Seattle looking every bit like the established heavyweight here, sitting at 25-11-8 on the season, third in the Central, built on a defense that is giving up about 2.64 goals a night and an offense a touch over 3 with a healthy positive goal differential around plus 21. They have gone 6-1-3 over their last 10, and they have pretty much been living out of suitcases on this long 7-game road swing that finally lands in Climate Pledge Arena for the last stop, which any business traveler will tell you is where the coffee stops working and the little details start to slip. The market clearly shows respect for that profile, hanging Minnesota as a road favorite in roughly the mid-150s on the money line, with Seattle catching plus money around the low 130s, which is exactly the sort of pricing that tells you bookmakers see one team as clearly better but not untouchable. On the other side, you get a home team that has quietly turned the season from "is this going off the rails" to "okay, this is getting fun," with an 8-1-1 run in its last 10 and a 9-game point streak at 8-0-1, built around a defensive group that is holding opponents to about 2.83 per game, while the attack still sits down near the basement in raw scoring at about 2.78 and a ranking in the mid-20s. That mix, strong at the back but still grinding for chances, combined with only about 26 shots on goal per game, does not feel like a wild, end-to-end underdog. It feels more like that stubborn coworker who never raises their voice but keeps showing up and making your life difficult shift after shift. Layer on the situation, with Minnesota already having emptied the tank through Los Angeles twice in 3 days and then having to get up one more time on the road before finally flying home, while Seattle gets the push from a charged-up home crowd and has that very human, we owe them one feeling after taking a 4-1 punch in the mouth from this same team in this same building back on December 8th. Altogether, you have an elite visitor priced as the clear favorite, a surging home side that the market still does not fully buy, and a schedule spot that, even if it is more art than science, makes the underdog feel a lot more alive than the numbers on the board suggest, which nudges the value side of this matchup toward the deep-sea sweaters. As our first pick for this matchup, the Seattle Kraken money line is our full game side pick. The total is sitting at a projected 6.5, with the under juiced into clear favorite range around minus 135, which is basically the market saying, yes, we saw that 7-4 fireworks show against Boston, but no, we still do not trust this to be a track meet every night. If you peel away that one loud result and go back to the season-long backbone, Minnesota lives around 3.11 goals scored and 2.64 allowed, while Seattle sits near 2.78 for and 2.83 against. And when you blend those together, you end up in that 5.7 to 5.9 expectation band. That sounds more like heavy hockey with pockets of offense than a pond hockey scorefest. Both sides are getting there without crazy shot volume, with Minnesota firing roughly 28.5 pucks on net per game and Seattle just over 26, numbers that sound boring on paper but on the ice usually translate to deliberate entries, set plays, and a lot of time spent trying to grind out good looks instead of trading 3-on-2s like a video game. Defensively, you are looking at a team tied inside the top 3 in the league for fewest goals against per game, lined up with another that sits in the top group as well. and both carry team save percentages north of .90, which is the statistical way of saying you really have to earn it to get one past these guys most nights. Their last meeting in this building finished 4-1, only 5 total goals, which fits that tight, low-margin picture pretty nicely, and with Minnesota closing out a long trip in a spot where coaches love to lean on structure and a simple road game, that style lean is less about a crystal ball and more about how bench bosses usually behave when they just want to get home in one piece. Seattle's penalty kill, which has been one of the softer spots in its profile, is the one big flashing warning sign for a low total, since a couple of quick power play goals can reckon under fast, but stacked against the overall defensive resumes, the solid goaltending numbers, and a market that already tilts toward fewer goals, the more sensible long-term picture still points towards something in that 3-2 or 3-1 neighborhood rather than another 7-4 circus. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. New Jersey Devils versus Pittsburgh Penguins. Pittsburgh comes into this one feeling more like the team fans expected back in October than the one that spent a month stuck in neutral, and that matters a lot when you are talking about a number hanging on this game rather than just vibes. They have rattled off a 5-game heater, cleaned up a lot of the sloppy details, and that power play that looked broken in October now looks like the thing every fan tried to build in their EA Sports franchise. You can see it in the way they attack entries, how patient they are on the half wall, and how comfortable they look zipping the puck around until someone blinks. On top of that, their overall profile is starting to look like a real playoff threat again, not just a nostalgia act built around a legendary captain. They are sitting at a record of 20-12-9 with 49 points, right in that Eastern Conference traffic jam where every game feels like it swings 3 teams up or down in the standings. That kind of context is important because a veteran room knows these are the nights you cannot afford to punt, especially at home in front of a crowd that has suddenly remembered how fun it is to watch the puck go in instead of clanging off posts. Special teams tilt the feel of this matchup too. Pittsburgh has one of the best power plays in the league at roughly 30%, and it passes the eye test, not just the spreadsheet. They stretch penalty kills side to side, they use the bumper, they move the puck quickly, and you almost sense that defenders are already thinking about the video session they are going to get roasted in whenever a pass sneaks through the seam. Their penalty kill is solidly above average as well, aggressive enough to bother breakouts without turning every clear into a fire drill behind their own net. In goal, the Penguins have something they simply did not have a couple of years ago, a tandem you can actually trust night to night. When you combine that with a structured breakout, cleaner gap control, and a coaching staff that seems to have settled on pairings instead of playing blender every other period, you get a team that feels stable. For bettors, stability is boring to talk about, but it is often where the edge actually lives. You are not just asking who has the biggest names, you are asking which side gives you fewer. What on earth was that moments over 60 minutes? Now look across at New Jersey, and the story is almost the opposite emotionally. They are not a bad team, they are just living in that frustrating space where the process looks fine, sometimes even good, but the results keep kicking them in the shins. They shoot a lot, they skate well, and on many nights they carry play, but the scoreboard keeps telling them not good enough, and there is only so long a room can hear that before the shoulders start to sag. Offensively, they are creating plenty of volume, basically 30 shots a night, but the puck is not rewarding them, and their goal total sits in the middle of the league rather than near the top, even though the raw shot numbers would suggest they should be higher. It feels like every fan has had that fantasy lineup where the underlying numbers look great, but every game ends 2-1 the wrong way, and that is kind of where this Devils group has lived. Defensively and on the kill, the cracks show more clearly. They are giving up just over 3 against per game, and the penalty kill is stuck down in the mid to high 70s, which is not a disaster, but is very much in the you do not want to lean on this in a big spot category. Combine that with a negative goal differential and suddenly those 1-goal losses are not just bad luck, they are a pattern. You saw the ugliest version of that pattern in the 9-0 hammering they just took from the Islanders, where they actually had plenty of puck but could not solve Ilya Sorokin at one end and could not stop anything at the other. Psychologically, that is a nasty result to carry into a back-to-back trip into Pittsburgh. Coaches will say the right things about flushing it, but players are human. You remember the last time you were embarrassed, especially when it comes with highlight pack replays running non-stop on every sports channel. And now you walk into a building where the home team is hot, the crowd is loud, and the opponent's power play is one of the last things you want to see when your own penalty kill has been leaking. Injuries do not help their margin for error either. New Jersey is still patching together depth with guys like Evgeny Dodonov, Zach McEwen, Jonathan Kovacevic, and Mark McLaughlin on the shelf. Simon Nemec is trending toward a return, but even when he draws back in, he is stepping into a blue line that has been under siege and a team that has been chasing games more than protecting them. That usually means heavier minutes for the top players, more tough matchups, and a little less gas late in the third, which is exactly where Pittsburgh has been finding ways to close games out in this recent run. On the other side, Pittsburgh's big names are healthy enough to carry a heavy workload, and there is a chance Evgeny Malkin returns, which would only lengthen their forward rotation and make matchups even worse for a Devils team already juggling bodies. Even if he stays in the stands in a suit for one more night, the core that has driven this surge is intact, confident, and playing a style that travels from period to period, not just from highlight to highlight. Honestly, when you put all of that together, you have one side with structure, momentum, and special teams juice, and another side that is fighting the puck, the schedule, and the scoreboard. As our first pick for this matchup, the Pittsburgh Penguins money line is our full game side pick. You have one team that just got 9 hung on them in a game where their goalie never really got a save he could feel good about, and another team that has quietly become one of the more entertaining watch tickets in the league because their games tend to turn into track meets with whistles. That is usually a recipe for goals. Let me explain why the rhythm of this matchup points that way. New Jersey, for all their struggles finishing, is not going to suddenly turn into a rope-a-dope, grinded-out group overnight. They are built to skate, to push the pace, and to spend time in the offensive zone. The numbers back that up with those near 30 shots per night, and you do not get that kind of volume playing slowly. After a 9-0 embarrassment, the natural instinct is to show something, to prove you can score again, and that tends to mean taking a few more risks, jumping into plays, and stretching shifts just a little longer than the coach would like. The funny thing is, that style might actually work better for them offensively in the short term, but it also opens the door for an even more chaotic game flow. Every time a defenseman pinches to keep a puck in, there is a chance the play goes the other way. Every extra gamble at the offensive blue line is a potential odd man rush the other direction. Against a Pittsburgh group that is finishing at a strong clip and loves quick strike offense when they get a turnover high in the zone, that is gasoline on the fire. Pittsburgh's own scoring profile feeds into the same story for the total. They are averaging over 3.25 goals per game and allowing just over 3 against, so their average night is already living in that 6+ goal neighborhood. That is not an accident. They play fast, they activate their defense, and they are not shy about throwing pucks into dangerous areas to create tips, rebounds, and broken plays. It is entertaining for neutrals and a little stressful if you have the under, because even a quiet period can explode with one power play or a couple of bad line changes. Speaking of special teams, this is where things can really snowball. Pittsburgh's power play is clicking at around 30%, and it is the kind of unit where even a failed 2-minute opportunity can still create momentum because you have had your best players touching the puck, feeling it, and circling in the offensive zone. New Jersey's penalty kill has been closer to the bottom than the top, so every minor they take carries a real risk of turning into a crooked number on the board. On the flip side, the Devils' own power play is competent enough to punish a Penguins team that can get a bit overeager on the kill and take a few too many trips to the box. More penalties, more special teams time, more chances for 5-on-4 snipes and backdoor tap-ins. The goaltending angle leans toward offense as well, not because the goalies are terrible, but because of the environment they are walking into. Jacob Markstrom is coming off that nightmare against the Islanders, and even if he rebounds, he is likely to face heavy traffic again against a Penguins attack that does not mind throwing pucks from everywhere and crashing the net. At the other end, the Skinner and Silov's tandem has been good, but not so dominant that you expect them to slam the door on a Devils team that, for all its issues, still drives volume and can finally get a bounce or two after such a brutal night. High shot counts plus very good, but not invincible. Goaltending is usually how you get those 7-goal type box scores, not those sleepy 2-1 finals. There is also the human factor we always underestimate. New Jersey's players and coaches know they need a response after getting humbled, and a common way to manufacture energy on the road is to lean into speed and offense early, to throw the first punch. If they score first, Pittsburgh has shown they are more than happy to open things up and chase games instead of sitting in a shell. If Pittsburgh scores first, the Devils almost have no choice but to push even harder, which only increases the chances of mistakes, penalties, and, you guessed it, more chances at both ends. Either way, the script keeps circling back to a game where the scoreboard operator does not get much time to sit down. So when you stack up the recent form, the shot volume, the special teams mismatch, and the emotional spot after that 9-goal loss, this matchup feels far more like a wide-open, chance-trading kind of night than a careful 3-2, trap-filled chess match. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Buffalo Sabres versus New York Rangers. This matchup at Madison Square Garden feels like two teams walking in with the same record sheet, but totally different moods in the room. On one side, you have a Buffalo group that finally looks like it believes its own story, sitting at 22-15-4 and coming in with that stretch of 11 wins in 12 games, including a franchise-tying 10-game run that only stopped in Columbus. They got punched in the mouth there, 5-1, then turned around at home and handled Vancouver 5-3, which tells you a lot about where their confidence is right now. Because bad teams let that sort of loss linger, and this version of Buffalo very clearly did not. Across the ice, New York sits at 20-18-6, which sounds perfectly respectable, but the recent rhythm has been choppy, 4-4-2 over the last 10, and the way they have arrived at that mark is the bigger concern. They had the emotional high of that Winter Classic in Miami, where they blew the doors off Florida in a 5-1 win and looked like a national TV commercial for Rangers hockey, then came home, saw Utah on the schedule, and watched that game slip away in overtime while losing their franchise goalie and top offensive defenseman to lower body injuries in the process. So you end up with a team that still has talent, still has stars, but is suddenly patching its blue line and asking a 39-year-old veteran to carry the workload in goal against a Buffalo side that has already shown it can roll 4 lines and keep coming for 60 minutes. Now, the market is treating this like almost a straight coin flip, with prices hovering around even money on either side, and that alone is interesting when you step back and look at the broader arc of the season. Buffalo scores more, roughly 3 goals a night. New York scores less, not even up to 2 3/5 on average. And while the Rangers have the cleaner goals against number, sitting under 3 allowed per game compared to Buffalo's figure a little over 3, a big chunk of that defensive edge has been built with the very guys who are now in suits instead of sweaters tonight. The Sabres, by contrast, have most of their key rotation available, with the injury list dominated by a backup goalie and some depth pieces, so the core of what has driven this surge is intact, and that matters when you are trying to judge whether a hot streak is smoke or fire. Schedule-wise, New York's recent path has not exactly been gentle either, with the spectacle of the outdoor game in Miami, the travel back, the high-intensity overtime loss to Utah, and now this one, all in a pretty tight window. Buffalo's load has been more straightforward, and that Columbus loss actually gave them a very natural reset point before they came home and took care of business against Vancouver. So if you are asking which bench is more likely to look fresher, more structured, and less like it is pushing uphill in the third period, honestly, the visitors check more boxes right now. You could talk yourself into the home crowd or the bounce-back narrative for New York, and sure, on a single night anything can happen, but if you strip away the jerseys and just look at recent form, health, and how each team is trending 5-on-5, it feels like the side in blue and gold is walking in with an actual plan while the hosts are leaning a bit more on hope and history. As our first pick for this matchup, the Buffalo Sabres money line is our full game side pick. If you mash these two scoring profiles together, you get something in the neighborhood of 5.7 goals per game combined, which means the bar is set a little higher than what they typically produce on an average night. Buffalo's attack is clearly the more dangerous one, but even they are not some 4 goals a night track team, and New York's scoring has been a grind for much of the season, closer to that 2.5 range, which is not exactly the recipe for fireworks unless the game totally comes apart. Here is the thing that often gets lost when people see a 6.5 on the board. They picture trading chances, end to end, pond hockey energy, but that is not how these two usually script games over 60 minutes. Buffalo is around 28 to 29 shots a night, New York closer to 25 to 26, and that shot volume tells you plenty about pace without needing a math degree. It is not that they never open up, but their default setting is a little more measured, more pick your spots than every rush turns into odd man chaos, especially when the game is in a building like Madison Square Garden where every mistake feels louder than it really is. On top of that, New York is now missing its primary puck mover on the back end and its star starter in net, which can actually move things in 2 directions at once. You might think losing defensive talent makes the game wild, but in spots like this it often does the opposite. The team tightens up, simplifies, and tries to keep the game in a lower event lane so the replacement pieces are not constantly exposed. The veteran who is stepping in has been quietly excellent this season in limited starts, with a goals against figure in the low 2s and a save percentage just under the 920 mark, which is the statistical way of saying he is still very capable of turning a game into a goalie duel if the structure in front of him holds. Buffalo, for its part, is absolutely capable of scoring in bunches, and they are rolling in with real swagger after that Vancouver win. But they are also facing a coach who now has every reason to squeeze the pace and lean into special teams and half-court offense instead of trading rush chances with a team that has been feeling good about its offense for a month. The first meeting between these two this season landed on a 4-0 scoreline, safely under this same 6.5, and nothing about the current setup screams that both sides suddenly turn into run-and-gun versions of themselves overnight. Could you still get a 6-goal game where one empty netter or weird bounce in the final minute breaks your heart if you are holding an under ticket? Of course, that is always in play in this sport, and it is exactly why totals betting can be so tilting. But when you step away from the noise and just weigh the scoring averages, the shot profiles, and the way injuries tend to nudge a coaching staff toward a tighter script, this looks more like a game that has to work to get to 7 than one that starts there by default. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.